Welcome to Incorporating and Documenting Sources for MLA and APA. Plagiarism. What is plagiarism? Well, plagiarism happens when you use someone else's work and you don't give a cited or source information on who wrote it and where it came from. When it comes to plagiarism, it's a no-no. Basically, this means if you didn't write it yourself, or you don't give credit where credit is due, or credit is earned, it's a problem. As a writer, you always want to give credit where credit is due. Don't miss out on giving someone mad props for all the hard work that they have done. Give credit where credit is due. We can't say this enough. If you are thinking that you're going to use someone else's work, think again. There are many ways that a professor or teacher can find out exactly what information and where it came from. They can know exactly whose work it was and why you haven't given the correct credit. It's a problem and it can hurt you. So as a rule of thumb, use your own work. Well, of course, why do I need citation? Your sources must be accurate. If it's accurate, it means either you used it word for word in a quote, or you summarized and paraphrased correctly, and the information that was used could be found. The reason why your sources must be accurate is because other people may find your work or information intriguing. They may want to use it in their own writing. And if they can't find the information correctly, well, how can they use it? What book can they find it from? Where is that information? And how can they get their hands on it? As a rule of thumb, if you think you're going to copy or buy a paper off the web, this is considered plagiarism. So copy and paste, think again. You will receive a 0 on your paper, as well as possibly being expelled from school. Each school, each teacher, each professor has different rules and guidelines for plagiarism. My expectation is that a paper will receive a 0, and of course, administration is going to know about it. I believe that each of you is capable, that you can write and produce your own paper. Try your best, and we won't have any problems. What you are not required to acknowledge. Well, when it comes to citation, you do not have to acknowledge results from your own research. If you did a survey of information, of course, you do not need to cite this. You also do not need to acknowledge facts that are available from many sources. One thing that might be of assistance is thinking about, did I have this as common knowledge before I actually introduce it to my paper? One fact that is available from many different sources is the sinking of the Titanic and how many deaths were on the actual Titanic. If you, of course, found it from a specific book, cite that book. But if you knew it as common knowledge, that is something that you are not required to acknowledge or cite within your paper. What you need to cite. Of course, you need to cite quotes that are taken word from an author, writer, or a person that spoke it. You also need to cite summaries and paraphrases. Even if the words came from you and are not said exactly word for word, summaries and paraphrases still need to be cited. Give credit where credit is due, of course. You learn the information from them, and you want someone to be able to find out this information in return. Of course, you need to cite facts that are not common knowledge. So, of course, if you didn't know it, other people probably don't know it. And ideas that are not common knowledge. If you read it in a book, you need to cite it. Statistics, research findings, examples, graphs, charts, and illustrations are all things that you need to cite. These are most likely copied, pasted, and will be easy to trace. So, as a key example, use citation and you won't have any problems. Deciding how to cite your sources. Consider if you need to summarize or paraphrase. If 3 or more words come from a certain source in a sentence, it needs to be cited. Of course, you're going to have prepositions and verbs that can be used in every single sentence known to mankind. But if 3 or more words come from a sentence that was used in a specific book, it needs to be cited. When it comes to citation and plagiarism, there are places that can help with citations, but as a quick reminder, all of these citation helpers have flaws. They may not give you the actual correct citation, and your paper grades may reflect this. The first is landmark citation, Night Cite, Easy Bib, or Citation Builder. These are all websites that you may use for extra help if you're stuck on a citation. They are not a go-to place, but they can help. Deciding when to quote versus paraphrase. Well, when do I need to use a quotation, or when do I need to paraphrase? If you want to refer to an idea or fact, but the wording is not critical, paraphrase or maybe summarize. When you want the language or meaning to be conveyed word for word, direct quote it. So, say you want a Vince Lombardi quote about rising after a fall, maybe you want to direct quote this. If you want his general idea, maybe it's time to paraphrase or summarize. Of course, all of these 3 things need to make sure you have citation at the end. Using quotes effectively. As a rule, limit quotes to 100 words or less. Make sure it supports your paper's main point. Don't just include a quote because a professor told you had to have 3 quotes. Include it because it actually applies to your paper, and it'll give someone who's reading your paper a good idea of support and actually a good idea about where the clarity and where this paper is headed. Introduce and give credit to the writer. If you know who the writer is, talk about them in the sentence before you actually use your quote. If it's not a writer but a speaker, introduce why that speaker might be important. What background do they have that would actually make them valuable to your paper? Check that the quote is properly formatted and punctuated. Of course, if you're using MLA or APA citation, you're going to want to make sure that both citation forms are correctly used. And by formatted, make sure you follow the rules for the citations that follow. Make sure you cite the correct source for each quotation. Of course, making sure that you use correct citation comes from the note-taking or the work that you do beforehand, before you actually write your paper. And lastly, make sure the quote is accurate word for word. If it's not word for word, of course, that is not considered a quote. It can lead problems with your plagiarism, and it can lead problems to your citation. So check through your citation and make sure that you have written it word for word. Integrating quotes. Well, what do we mean by actually integrating quotes? A quote or reference shouldn't stick out like a sore thumb. It needs to be embedded and ingrained in the materials that you write. So if you integrate a quote, it means that it'll fit right into your paper and it'll seem like a flawless integration. Here's an example. Even those who fought for the U.S. in the U.S.-Mexican War of 1846 were skeptical of American motives. Insert quotation for direct quotes. We were sent to provoke a fight, but it was essential that Mexico should commence it. End quotation marks. Parentheses, Grant, the author, page 68, parentheses, period. Of course, here we're referring back to Ulysses S. Grant. And we're talking about the U.S.-Mexican War. Well, why would Grant actually be beneficial to your paper? Because, of course, Ulysses S. Grant was one of the best fighters for the Union, and actually for America in his time. Ulysses S. Grant was a very famous general. When it comes to integrating and embedding quotes, you might want to use signal phrases to help introduce your quote to the rest of your sentence or the rest of your paragraph. So examples, X says, X believes, X contends, X claims that, X complains that. X described, X has suggested. Find a great verb that comes after your noun to lead into your quote or summary. Of course, every time I spoke of X, that would be where you included your writer or author. And then include a signal phrase that introduces the rest of your quotation. Introducing block quotations. Long direct quotations are called block quotations. Block quotations will stand out from the rest of your paper because, of course, they are long, and they also need to be word for word. A quote of that which is longer than 4 lines in MLA is indented 1 inch. In APA, a quote of 40 or more words is indented 1/2 inch. This is something to know whether or not you're writing in MLA or APA format. Long quotes are double-spaced in MLA and APA, so same rule for both. Make sure before the quote you also integrate who said it or where it came from. That means you're using an introduction to integrate your quote into the rest of your paragraph and the rest of your sentence. What is a block quote? Well, when you actually write with a block quote, this is where you're putting your quotation of 100 words or less into a quote that stands out. No quotation marks appear around a block quote, unless you actually use direct quotations inside. That would be the only place that you would use actual quotation marks inside a block quote. But of course the quotation marks do not need to be around the outside. Words quoted in the original retain the double quotation marks. So, of course, this is where I said, if words were quoted word for word because a person spoke them, you're going to want to include quotation marks around the actual quote that has been said. The page number appears after the period at the end of the block quotation. This is something you'll want to figure out when you're writing for MLA or APA format. And before a paragraph is closed off, it is a good idea to include at least 1 or 2 sentences following the quotation to describe its significance to your thesis. Well, here's the point again. Why am I including this long paragraph? Is it just taking up space in my paper, or is it actually vital to my paper? This is something you're going to want to point out to your professor or teacher. Tell us why is this important? Why would I need that paper there? Always double check your quotations. It is vital that they are accurate and word for word. This is why they are called a quote, not a paraphrase or summary. Integrating summaries and paraphrases. Summaries and paraphrases need to be given introductions, just like quotes. The sources can be integrated into the paragraphs, just like quotes. But quotation marks may not be used because the words may not be exactly word for word. Summaries and paraphrases also need signal, phrases, and introductions. So when you use integrated summaries and integrated paraphrases, of course you don't need quotation marks, but you still need to give credit where credit is due. So here's an example. In 2001, it became as fashionable to say the internet changes nothing as it had been to claim the internet changes everything just 2 years before. In the midst of the internet gloom, one prominent contrarian has emerged to defend the internet. Michael Lewis observes in book title, "Next, the future just happened," that it's as if, and these are the words he stated directly, some crusty old baron who had been blasted out of his castle and was finally having a look at his first cannon had said, "All it does is speed up balls." Of course, that's where Michael Lewis is quoting someone else, so an apostrophe is used, followed by an apostrophe, and closes off the double quotation marks because he's done speaking. Parenthesis, page 14, end parenthesis, period. Lewis claims that while the profit-making potential of the internet was overrated, the social effects were not. He sees the internet demolishing old castles of expertise along with many traditional relationships based on that expertise. So of course this was a long summary and paraphrase. You can see many words and a direct quotation used. Here, the words may not be all from the writer, but they've been changed to actually help they help with the clarity. They help give actual definition to what topic you're discussing. Introducing quotes. Make sure that when you introduce each quotation, it is clear why it is important to your text. Quotes, summaries, and paraphrases are in your paper for a reason. Make sure you introduce them and give reasons why they are in your paper. Show the significance of the quotes to your reader and make sure that they connect from your paper to the text. Again, you always want to be positive that what you write connects directly to the quotes and statements that you're going to include in your paper to help back up your information, back up your ideas. When it comes to the research project, each of you will be asked to plan your organization, write a draft, write a specific title. Don't just make a general statement. Write an engaging introduction. Of course, you want to keep your reader wanting and asking for more. Write a strong conclusion. Make sure we gather an idea. This is why I wrote this paper. Leave us with some passion. Review and revise. Make sure that your eyes are not the only eyes that see this paper. Ask for help when it is needed. And finally, check for clarity. This is the end of the PowerPoint presentation, but at this moment in time, I would ask that you would turn to the APA or MLA style and view either your MLA or APA video or look further in your book for more help. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask.